You know, everyone says life is about the journey, not the destination, but a journey actually assumes that there is a destination at the end of that journey. So Alan Watts says it beautifully. He goes, life is not a journey. Life is a dance, because really there is
Oh, that's
no
cool. I like
beginning
that.
and end. Like if you were to go dancing with somebody, you're not thinking in your mind when you're dancing of when the end of the dance is. Are you? There's
Yeah.
no like it's not like a marathon where there's a finish line. You're just fully making those intuitive adjustments in the moment, and you're fully present. There's no beginning and no end.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to ALLSMITH, where we dive deep into the art of living fully and authentically. Today, we're joined by a guest who embodies presence, resilience, and a profound connection to the journey within. Jonah Kest. Jonah has inspired thousands on the mat and beyond, bringing the world of yoga and mindfulness to life in ways that are raw, real, and refreshingly accessible. He's one of the most relatable people on the planet. He's known for his grounding energy and relentless commitment to growth. He doesn't just teach yoga, he teaches life. Get ready to tune in, breathe, and be reminded of the power in every moment as we welcome Mr. Jonah Kest to ALLSMITH. Welcome, dude.
Thank you for that intro. I can tell it was from the heart. A lot to live up to, but it's interesting hearing those words and reflecting on them in real time.
Totally, man.
Gratitude.
As I explored your journey a little bit and kind of zoomed out and just kind of felt your remote energy, something that came to mind is the body benefits from movement, but the mind benefits from stillness. Let's explore that concept a little bit together so that people can gain a little bit of context.
The body benefits from movement, but the mind benefits from stillness. Well, this is true. So at least understanding this first element is a step in the right direction. But moving the body is a means to still the mind. So they're deeply connected. Essentially, moving the body can be a vehicle in order to essentially still the mind. There's other ways to get there, but that is just one way through, intentional movement. It could be what most people call flow state. It could be, just going for a walk and being mindful of each step in front of the other. But somehow, this doorway marked physical, moving the body, is a very accessible way to connect to the mind, because the mind is always, it's very abstract. The mind is full of different emotions. Depending on how you describe the mind, you could describe it as consciousness, you could describe it as the ultimate observer, but it's very hard to just see mind. But the mind often reflects our physical bodies. So every single emotion that we have manifests into something physical, whether it be a sensation, an abnormality in our breathing, or some kind of physical movement. So if we can channel that and observe the body through movement, that actually allows us to look at the mind. It's not the end goal, but it just allows us to look at it. And I think that's the first step, just to simply notice. And then from there, there's obviously deeper levels of stillness that can be cultivated.
Very well said, man. I loved the word that you used there, notice, because it's so easy to allow all the external distractions and the pressures of society and bills that need to be paid and expectations that need to be met and pressures that need to be diffused in some capacity as like a pressure valve to find our way back to a grounded stillness state. But when you go back to that concept of notice, you become the observer. And I think something that I've observed from your content, from your guidance of other people through your retreats, is that you allow people to just be rather than just do. And I think a lot of the world feels this intrinsic pressure of, I won't be loved unless I do the thing. Versus you allow people to be loved for just being in that present moment. Let's touch on that for a quick second.
Yeah, I guess those things can be related. I feel as if a lot of people have a mindset of, let me develop this muscle, or let me become this financially successful, or let me, you know, be able to conquer this event or title, and then I'll be happy, then I'll be successful. Whereas that's not necessary. That's a dangerous avenue to take because
It's like, I'll be happy when.
exactly, yeah, it's this conversations happen, and most people innately know this, but they ignore it. Whereas the yogis kind of flip the mindset a little bit, because if you look at like Maslow's hierarchy, which is like this triangle that says, and there's some intelligence. I think everybody needs resources, everybody needs stability. And from that stability, you can cultivate whatever we're talking about at the top, whether it be spiritual, enlightenment, or just happiness, and whatever you want to call it. But the yogis decided to take Maslow's triangle. And for those who aren't familiar, he just says, food, water, and shelter are at the very bottom of the pyramid. And then from there, financial success. And then once you have that security, then you can start to branch out into other areas of your life and have more success. But the yogis flip it around. And I'm not telling you to quit your job or not anything like that. But the yogis say start with spirituality first. Start with your passion first, or your interest first. Go there, explore it, and then from that abundance, all that other stuff like security, food, water, shelter will sort of come to you. And like I said, take everything with a grain of salt, but it is a unique way to really surrender to what you're doing, and not have a plan B, and really just commit and give everything that you have. And the universe will provide for you if you're really listening to your
Hmm.
to your own dharma, or your own purpose. And that happens through experimentation, right? It happens through not just experimentation, but trial and error, experimentation with observation, and coming back to that noticing. Because and that's so important for many reasons. We can kind of continue to dive down that, but does that sort of answer what
No,
you
it
were
totally does. And I love that you touched on Maslow's hierarchy. We often talk about self actuality and guiding people towards their peak expression. And I know in the past you've kind of unpacked a little bit, like, in my opinion, and I think from your words too, you're more than just a teacher, but the word teacher is like relatable, and it's easy in the LA scene to be like, oh, I'm a yoga teacher. But in reality, what I see is that you co pilot people's journey towards their peak expression, and yoga just seemingly is the vessel. And then from there, you connect it to music and other things within the movement space. I mean, I see you strength training. I see you playing with hoops. I see you having like a vibe and a style, as opposed to just like, let's trade money for time and let's do this
Mhm.
fitness thing. It's like, it's more than that. We're connective on a cerebral sense
Yeah.
of dance and playfulness.
Yeah, we're all multi-dimensional beings, and your dharma isn't essentially the thing that you do, it's the thing that happens in others when you do what you do. And that thing
Mm.
that you do isn't necessarily a specific modality. Like for both of us, it seems like you've, mastered, or advanced in many disciplines, but it's that quality that threads through all of them. And what qualities did you build in basketball? For me, growing up playing basketball, I'm sure you can relate. I learned discipline. I learned how to work with a team. I learned how to handle pressure. When that shot clock or the fourth quarter is running low, you learn these qualities. And that's the same thing with yoga. Is you're not you could say you're coming to Thailand to learn how to do a perfect handstand, or put your foot behind your head, but that's the physical, that's what attracts people initially. But what qualities are you gaining? And I like to say benevolent qualities, because these are the things that we want to cultivate, right? The things that are really, really serving us in our life. Things like patience, things like balance, things like equanimity, which is your non-reactivity. And we just
Hmm.
don't learn these. We learn math, history, reading, and science, but we never learn, to focus our breath and not react to external, distractions.
Hmm. No, it's very well said. I love the term equanimity, and I love the way you describe it. It also brings me to the point of like, throughout this conversation, throughout our life, throughout our day, in order to be present, you do have to have this small percentage of your mind that is focused on your breath. because we take, a certain number of breaths a day. I don't know the exact number, but by paying attention to that, that allows us to be in the present moment and truly listen rather than waiting to respond or, allowing our anxieties or our frustrations or our traumatic pasts to infiltrate the present moment. And I've heard you talk about that a lot.
Yeah.
What advice do you give to some of your clients and patients in the pursuit of like trying to be here now
Mm.
and connect with their breath?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, the breath is just simply a tool, right? It's something that we do both consciously and unconsciously, but it can be an incredible tool to help anchor you into the present moment. As soon as you give your importance or your awareness, you bring the attention to the, small triangular area below the tip of your nose, there is a level of presence because your breath is always with the present moment. It's always happening, or whether you're noticing it or not. So it can be an anchor and a tool. It's not the only way to become fully present. There's really cool exercises where, you can just sit with the partner and you guys can look into each other's eyes. And you'll notice just by creating that eye contact, you're immediately pulled into the present moment. There's no room for, dwelling into the past or the future. Somehow, when something outside of you is observing you, you become fully present.
Mm-hmm.
And there's movement practices that, yes, some of them are connected to breath, but there's many, many different ways to become present. But I guess let's talk about why we even want to be present. And I mean, maybe one of the reasons why we'd want to be present is so we don't miss our entire lives, because everything that's happening to us is happening to us right now. It's the only thing that we truly have. But so many of us, including myself, we spend so many hours of the day blindly, actually. We don't even know we're doing it, imagining things of the future, kind of like pretending, predicting, fantasizing, or we're doing the opposite. We're regretting, we're staying up at night because we can't, stop thinking about what we had said to that person and how it made them feel. And we're totally just in the past. And then we kind of miss what's happening right in front of us. So
No,
really,
it's very well said. Like the analogy that comes to mind is like, let's just say you're hiking to a lake. We've become such an outcome oriented mindset society that as a byproduct, we miss the ruggedness of the texture as we're walking, to notice the birds and the change of climate and the cloud structure and the sun and the wind that's crossing between the trees, because we're solely in pursuit of making it to the beautiful lake. But we're missing the now in pursuit of what will be. And what will be is so much better when you appreciate the now, because then you're able to like tangibly feel the process. And I think that's more time. If you look at the concept of probability, you spend more time in the process, less time at the outcome, but we seemingly romanticize the outcome.
Yeah, well said. I love that lake analogy. I think, also too, like we're constantly like the way we're living is we're living in reactivity. And when we live in this reactive state, we're not choosing, we're extremely blind. So becoming present is that first step to essentially, coming out of that blind pattern, that blind habit pattern of reaction. That presence is actually an awareness. So we no longer are just, we can actually start guiding our lives, which could lead into a whole nother topic, but just purely from an enjoyment standpoint, like you start to notice things you never noticed before. And it doesn't have to be this dogmatic thing, like, or so poetic, like I noticed the wind as it brushed through the leaves while really maybe just come at it from the stance like, okay, there is a lake at the end of this hike, but that doesn't mean it's the end. Everyone
Mm-hmm.
says life is about the journey, not the destination, but a journey actually assumes that there is a destination at the end of that journey. So Alan Watts says it beautifully. He goes, life is not a journey. Life is a dance, because really there is
Oh, that's
no
cool. I like
beginning
that.
and end. Like if you were to go dancing with somebody, you're not thinking in your mind when you're dancing of when the end of the dance is. Are you? There's no
Yeah.
like it's not like a marathon where there's a finish line. You're just fully making those intuitive adjustments in the moment, and you're fully present. There's no beginning and no end. So
Yeah,
when you're
it's like momentary playfulness, which is cool.
exactly, it is playful, and that's enlightenment, and that's coming back to how we were, intuitively as children. So, when
Hmm.
people say connect to your inner child, that's what they're talking about.
Yeah, that's really well said. That level of ping pong right there was fun. I like getting a little bit of insight into your mind. How did you explore your journey into yoga? Because your dance into the pursuit of your current craft is a little bit unorthodox compared to other people.
Yeah, without maybe getting too deep, I've talked about, my family story in other podcasts, but really I think life is going to present you with different opportunities. It's going to put certain things in front of you, and it's really important for you to know that you didn't find it, it found you. And
Mm.
from that humility, I think, again, it's about trying things on and seeing how they feel on you, and also seeing how other people feel around you when you're doing those things. And for me, yoga was just like, I didn't even choose it. It was a no-brainer. As soon as I started doing it, I could tell that I was getting better, in all dimensions of my life. I was improving. And other people around me were also improving, in the sense that you could feel their energy uplift around me when I was living in my highest, awareness in arena, doing what I love. So I guess, I don't know if that answers your question. Maybe you can reiterate it one more time.
No, totally. It does a little bit, but you have this deep connectivity with your father's yoga practice, with your uncle's yoga practice, and you ended up going to the University of Colorado Boulder. Shout out to Prime and their football team, which is really entertaining to watch. There's a lot going on there. Um, but you ultimately made the decision, hey, like this isn't really for me. You're kind of finding your way into smoking weed and things that weren't really lighting your heart on fire, and then you took the leap into
Hey
something
man,
that,
why are you giving me away? I'm just kidding.
hey, it's legal now. We can
Hey,
toss it
that's
out into
true.
the ethos.
Yeah, it was when I had first gone to Boulder, just like any high school student, I was really excited for my first year at college. And it was, I think, 2014. And that was the year marijuana was legalized in Colorado specifically.
Hmm.
So you would see all those memes on the internet of just clouds floating over Boulder.
Yeah.
And just like any, young college kid, I was pulled in a lot of different directions, and had a lot of distractions. But really the turning point for me was I got sick.
Mm.
I My whole body physically shut down. You could call it chronic fatigue. You could call it mono, whatever you want. Whatever it was, I'm still not exactly sure. The body basically just said no,
Hmm.
and it completely shut down. And I had to really emergency, like I had to get out. I had to put myself in a different environment because nothing was working. And that's when my grandfather, he's really responsible for our entire family's yoga legacy. He had offered me a one-way ticket out to Australia to live with him, and he was going to sort of cure me. And he didn't really cure me by giving me any medication. He just helped me kind of come back to what I truly wanted to be and what I wanted to do. And this brings me back to a quote I recently had read: is, if you don't say no, the body eventually will. So if you're
The
living,
body keeps the score for sure.
yeah, have you read that book?
Oh yeah,
So yeah,
phenomenal book.
essentially, if you're living not in your full authenticity, it's gonna somehow again come out physically, whether that be some sort of disease, or it's gonna create stress, and that stress will ultimately shut things down and literally force you into something else that's more congruent with your truth. And then that's kind of what I learned in Australia as a young adult. And I remember the first thing I did when I landed is I was very confused about my diet. I had
Mm.
been born and raised a full vegan. I've never had any kind of animal up until I was 18 years old. And I had a lot of uncertainty and curiosity and questions like, is this really the right diet for me? European, my Eastern European ancestors, were they vegan? You know, Regardless of the morality behind it and the environmental, sort of benefits to being plant-based, I just had questions. I was a young kid. But the first thing he did when we landed is we went to one of his favorite local restaurants in Byron Bay, And he said, I want you to look at the menu, and the first thing that your mind goes to, don't question it, order it. And it happened to be a steak. And, not saying that steak's the right way, but that was where my mind intuitively went. And he goes, okay, order it. You can't change your mind. That was what your body told you to do. And I think from that instance, I just started to trust, not even in just what I'm eating, but I just started to strengthen that connection with my intuition. You don't have to
Like
overthink
listening
shit.
to your inner compass a little bit better.
Yeah. People get way too in their head. And I think the practice of yoga is going from your head to your heart and listening to your gut. I mean, I don't have to reaffirm, Andrew Huberman just said it at the latest conference that I was just at. The science is evident. Our gut is our second brain. 10 years ago, they just didn't buy it, but now it's verified. So, just strengthening that even past your gut to your heart, your intuition, and yoga, for me, to kind of tie it all together, is that practice of strengthening, the most important relationship you have in your life. And that is between your mind and your body.
Free is the way to be. Life beats us up a bit and causes some bumps and bruises, but that doesn't mean we have to stay on the sidelines. This is why we've partnered with Kinyan Labs. Get back to doing what you love with this incredible portable device designed to get you back in the game. Kinyan is on a mission to move people from pain to possible with their top-rated red light therapy and laser solution, which tackles inflammation along with muscle and joint pain quickly and effectively. What I love is that it's portable and rechargeable, making it easy to actually incorporate into my everyday life consistently. It's small and lightweight, so you can throw it in your gym bag or work bag or even an overnighter. Kinyan's lasers and LED combo make this cutting-edge device extremely versatile for use with general aches and pains, as well as chronic back pain, arthritis, post-surgery recovery, endometriosis, and more. This has been an amazing tool keeping my elbows and knees pain-free for pressing, pulling, and squatting in the gym. Great tools like the Move Plus give me the freedom and flexibility to continue living life on my terms without limitations. There are a lot of reasons why over 15,000 people are using this device and rating it 4.7 stars and above. Head on over to kinyan.io and use code ALLSMITH at checkout to begin your pain-free journey. I think that's very beautifully said, and it's cool that you took that personal inventory. You recognized that, like, one of the greatest gifts you can give to the world is to allow people to be seen, heard, and understood. But in that moment, you were experiencing sickness. You weren't allowing yourself to be seen, heard, and understood by you. And so there needed to be something disruptive in order to change up the frequency at which the way you were living. You end up in Australia, and your grandfather is just like, hey, let's get a baseline as to where you're at right now. Okay, cool. You picked the steak. Let's try to explore that. How do you feel? What are the symptoms, the signs? What's your energy like associated with the things that are now being infiltrated into your large intestine, your gut, which now, as we just described, is your second brain? And just simply noticing. That doesn't mean that that's perfect for everybody. It just means for you in that moment, you were taking a personal inventory, which before you were playing this game of the pursuit of experiences in college and taking the leap and trying to figure out if you can sink or swim. And there was just this level of constant distraction that worked until it didn't work anymore. And you're like, all right, I need a change of environment. And most people don't think that they can read books or watch podcasts or listen to things and all of a sudden their mindset is going to change their physical. But in reality, you have to take action first and the mindset will follow.
Totally. Yep. That's the key.
How did you transition from Australia? What kind of took place after that, and how did you find your way into deep yoga practice and eventually teaching?
Yeah, so before that kind of rewind, the seed of yoga was obviously planted a long time ago. I had already had the tools to at least share my expression of yoga from my father. So I kind of had that in my back pocket. So I think once I landed in Australia and I started to find my health again, I woke up one morning with an email. I was lightly on social media. I was still experimenting. That was a whole nother journey. And I woke up from an email with a studio saying, "Hey, we see you're in Australia. Is there any way you could come and do a pop-up class?" And this was
Mm.
the first time ever in my life that I've been invited to teach. And I did not take that lightly. I was extremely excited and, you know, had some help. And I got my flight booked from Byron Bay all the way to Brisbane. And that was where I led my first, and then eventually Melbourne. And it kind of turned into this like tour. So the universe was like, look, like if you really want to run with this, like we're going to give you some opportunities. And I'm extremely grateful for those opportunities because it lit a fire underneath me that still has not been, um, you know, put out.
Extinguished.
Yeah, that
So
fire.
these doors are opening. How did you personally, you're young at this point, you just overcame some health issues. How did you kind of manage this intrinsic level of uncertainty of like, I'm not really sure what's next. I'm not really sure what's through that door, but I know it's opening for me and I have this opportunity, so I'm just going to go do the thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of nervousness, a lot of I was very hesitant in some aspects, but part of it was just when you're doing the things that you're supposed to be doing, you just do them and you don't overthink
Hmm.
it. But I also had really good mentors. So I had seen my entire life, my uncle and my father traveling, teaching. I've been around it. So it was deep within me already. It was in my blood. So it kind of felt organic to just, even though it might feel like a lot for a new teacher to just come into a new country, let alone city, and just, share a class and actually have no idea what the fuck I'm doing. I still, I think I was like 18 or something, and I still, have so much to learn. And, I just think from seeing them do it so many times that I could kind of like fake it, not fake it, but at least just do it with enough certainty where it was felt. And I think
No,
people,
totally. I also think like you had this unique level of exposure therapy as a young child that you were just naturally a sponge based on that level of environment.
I love how that's
And
put.
then when it came time to this level of like, all right, what I'm doing isn't working. Let
Hmm.
me just go back to what I think I know.
Hmm.
That's kind of been there since I was very, very young. And let me just like squeeze the sponge a little bit and share this song that's inside that maybe people will resonate with. And then if they don't, over the course of time, I'll just make the song better.
Yeah, that well said. I couldn't have said it better myself. I think really that's the key. And I think where a lot of people get stuck. So, I'll try to make these experiences relatable for everyone is like, take that training, like really cultivate your toolkit, sharpen all your tools. But ultimately, the best experience is throwing yourself into the fire. So you don't
Mm-hmm.
have to be able to, hold a perfect handstand to teach that next yoga class. You don't have to have a big following on Instagram to host your first retreat. Don't necessarily wait because your evolution and your progress is going to be completely unique to anybody else's. And we learn from teaching. You said it in the beginning of the podcast. You said we're all teachers. We all, whether it's our significant other, we're explaining something to them that we learned. We're all intuitively, naturally teachers. And I think sometimes we can get into the habit of, I need to take this training or I need to have this
Mm-hmm.
much experience before I'm worthy. But, ultimately, like we said, really that student, all they truly need, yes, your experience is valuable, your expertise is valuable, but really what they need is someone to simply observe them and give them feedback. And from that loop, that's where real progress is made from that student teacher relationship. But of course, and then from there, the more experience you have, then you have more wisdom because
Yeah, for
wisdom
sure.
is experience.
Hmm. That was the first moment where I think I got a peek behind the curtain where I could truly feel your energy remotely in the sense of I'm going to try to summarize it or mirror you a little bit, but that's to teach is to learn twice. And I think for you, it's less about being in pursuit of becoming this expert where you put this pressure on yourself of, man, maybe some days I'm like vibing and I am the fucking expert. And then other days you're like, man, I have this imposter syndrome. I'm creating this high hanging fruit that's like unattainable for the personal moment that I'm in. And I love the concept of just like, we're teaching, we're playing, we're on our mat, we're in the present moment. And it goes back to what you said, that inner child, that childlike mindset. Like back in the day when we're on the playground in kindergarten or elementary school or in the sandbox trying to build something, there's not this comparative analysis of like, how good does Jonah build his sandcastle? It's like, hey man, you want to play? I'm noticing we've like got this similar energy. We want to do this thing. And then maybe in between building the sandcastle, we can do some cartwheels, some somersaults, maybe some handstands. Why? Because it's fucking fun. Not because we're trying to like post it to Instagram, but because we're just vibing. And it's just like, what's a safe space to kind of fuck off for a second?
Yep. Isn't it that simple, man? We need to not only play more, but we need to create spaces where that's accepted. Because we always have these like results and I found this really interesting. I heard this at this conference that I was at, and I've been reflecting on it. Is they're doing, have you ever heard the term like choking? Like people choke in the fourth quarter. It's a sports term.
Yeah.
I know you have.
Yep.
We've all choked, right, at the last second. But and they're actually doing science behind this, and they're finding out why people choke, why people don't perform when the pressure is on. Sometimes they do. Obviously, we have the goats that can perform. But what happens is when the stakes are extremely high, we tend to literally freeze. We put so much pressure on ourselves that we get into like paralysis.
Yep.
But the reason the stakes are high is because we have some sort of expectation of the results.
Yes.
So the yogis practice actually not being attached to the results. It doesn't mean you don't need to give everything that you have, but don't focus on the results. And I think that will eliminate our ability to choke, and it will help actually us, really lean into the adversity and just be present with it and perform at our highest level, or it doesn't even have to be a performance. It could just be making the right decision. It could be just adapting in the way that needs to be, so you have the least amount of resistance to that situation. Are you picking up what I'm saying?
No, I'm picking up what you're putting down for sure. And I think another way to say it is we develop this paralysis by analysis in crucial moments that have high stakes. But we have high stakes because we place this pressure on the outcome. Let's just say making a free throw at the end of the game.
Yep.
But rather than going up and thinking, man, I have this routine, I've shot this free throw hundreds of thousands of times.
Yeah.
We almost develop this spotlight effect.
Yep.
Where it's like, oh, I'm thinking about the external world's expectations on me. Now, instead of me being playful, young, childlike Bryce that has done this many times, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, where's my elbow going to go? How's my follow through? How's the ball feeling in my hands? What is the sweatiness of my hand? What's the texture of the ball?
Yep.
What's the environment around me? What's going on behind the hoop and all the people trying to have distractions? You almost go up to shoot, not to miss, rather than trying to make it. And then as a byproduct of these overwhelming inputs, the output then becomes different than what it would normally be if you and I were just, doing shot for shot for fun while we're just like bullshitting about yoga and transferable skills and perspective architecture.
Oof. Yeah, we're on the same page. So, and then so to kind of bring this all together is like we're intellectualizing on these, fairly relatable concepts, right? But like this is where yoga comes in, and not necessarily yoga, but any sort of awareness practice. Yoga is a great, I'm a little biased, but I think yoga is an incredible practice to actually bring what we're talking about into our lives. Because that's why they call it a yoga practice, because you're literally practicing these things in a safe container. You're taking the qualities of meditation, right? And we're bringing it into movement. And the movement literally acts like an obstacle course. It's meant to bring some complexity. to these things that we're trying to cultivate in meditation. And it makes it more lifelike. We're going through ups and downs. We're moving through twists and turns, but we have to maintain our awareness and connection to our breath. We have to feel that presence, even with all these external levels of adversity. And then, hopefully you get so good at it in that room or on your, 2x4 mat, that when you go out into the real world, that quality, that practice impermeates your whole entire life. So it's the middle ground. It's not quite real life yet, but it's a safe place to practice these things that we just didn't learn in K through 12. And
Totally, man.
that's to the place our mind dwells. We're constantly stuck in our mind and we're addicted to our thoughts. Most people don't really realize this because they don't consider it to be an addiction. When you think of an addiction, you think of like things like caffeine or tobacco or, any sort of drug. But the largest addiction that we have is the addiction to our thoughts. So you can only imagine like the withdrawal symptoms that you'd have for breaking one of the biggest addictions we have in our entire lives. And those withdrawal symptoms, they come out in a yoga class. I mean, as a teacher, you can almost laugh because you can see it. People are picking their nails, they're looking up, they're agitated because they're in real time. You're watching them break a massive addiction. But on the other side of that is a lot of clarity and a lot of presence.
The Trident family taught me something really important this last year, that we are all a bundle of stories, both good, bad, and everything in between. All of their cold brews remind their customers that they are part of something bigger than themselves. I start my day with the Sweet Cream Cold Brew as I am prepping my mind and body for fitness, service, coaching, and podcasting. With various locations in San Diego, they offer over 14 nitro cold brews and a variety of specialty drinks. You can find the perfect brew and pair it with one of their treats from the Keto Bakery. You can check them out over at tridentcoffee.com and use code ALLSMITH to take your coffee experience to the next level. Yeah, man, there's so many layers to the onion that I want to grab onto, and I think the first one that I want to peel back a little bit with you is just this concept of like, be on your mat, remove the sociological structure of comparative analysis to other people in the class, remove the comparison to the instructor, and just be on your mat and recognize that it's not a performance. It is a practice. And I think part of that construct, and I'm curious your analogies here, but the analogy that comes to mind for me is thoughts are coming through. For whatever reason, they come through to me on the left. I say hello to them. I wave like, hey, I'm acknowledging you. I'm recognizing my mind is going there. I'm not just practicing the art of toxic positivity. But then I'm like, okay, do I want to grant you a permission slip to stay? Do you add value to this current moment, or do I have to allow you to pass? And then I think of like a tethering or a fishing line. It's like, I almost want to cut that of like, okay, I recognize you. You're not really I don't really want to hang out with you. I want you to eat, but you're not going to eat at my table. Here's the cut. Now you move on. And that's kind of how the thoughts should kind of play a little bit. What are some analogies that you play with there as far as like, thoughts are going to come and go. You can't just like remove them. Well, but you can eventually get better at it.
Yeah, I like that analogy. I think there's many analogies that you could use, and we have to be careful because there is this danger that we can just get attached to the words. Again, just coming back and attached to these analogies without them actually having any sort of real,
It's a good point.
Practicality. This is a danger that I found, especially in the spiritual world. We get really attached to the words. Equanimity, it's the biggest word that I know.
Same.
But I do like that analogy of like, you can think of it like when you have a visitor to your home, if you react to that visitor, they kind of sort of take over your home. But if you don't react, they sort of just come, they stay for some time, and then they eventually leave. And I think that brings us to this truth that we actually don't pick and choose our thoughts. And we can't actually consciously let go of our thoughts, which might sound, some people may disagree with this. But according to some of the ancient meditation teachers, specifically in the Buddhist lineage, they say that you don't let go of your thoughts actually let go of you.
Ooh.
Because if you really truly think that you can actively choose your thoughts and actively let go of them, you're basically saying you're in control of consciousness, right?
Yeah.
So the whole purpose of yoga is to bring your attention back to the breath and the body. And then eventually those thoughts that you have will let go of you. Your job is just to keep coming back.
Mm.
And eventually they'll lose, those same old thoughts that we have every single day. You keep coming back to your practice and those things start to lose their grip. They're not essentially going to disappear, but they start to weaken their grip. And then eventually when they do leave, they leave from the root. So instead of we're
Mm.
not ignoring them, but meditation is a focus exercise. We're bringing our attention back. We're not dwelling and going down the rabbit hole of those, mindless thoughts, but we're coming back, and then slowly they start to leave from the roots, and they don't usually come back, especially if they're, negative thoughts, but that might take thousands and thousands of, conscious breaths to get rid of them.
Mm-hmm.
But every single time, and this, you could put this into like a practical example of like, let's say you have an emotion or a thought of, you know, anger. Anger arises within you. You could say like, I'm going to consciously let go of this anger, and kind of like intellectualize it. Or you can simply come to your breath and just see how long that emotion arises and then passes away. And then the next time someone makes you angry, instead of it like sweeping you away, you've been there before. It holds you a little less. Your younger brother or sister at the next Thanksgiving can pick your buttons just a little bit less, and you notice the difference.
Mm-hmm.
So I think
That's so cool the way you said that, man. It's this relationship to the concept of attachment, where we have this attachment to our ego, that we have this false perception of reality that we're actually in control of letting go. But in reality, we have to be and allow the thing to, like you said, loosen its grip and eventually let go of us. I've never heard it put that way before. That's magical, man. That's really cool.
thank you, bro. Well, I can tell you deeply were listening, and you explained it, you reiterated it so beautifully yourself. And that's the first step, right? And then you get to actually experience it through meditation. Um, and and I think all these things, the cool thing is it all really connects, right? You're talking about attachment. You're talking about, these conversations that you had with your father, um, in his final moments. And we don't have to wait. We don't. And there is, an active visualization that you can maybe play with. But if I can assume, the reason these conversations that you had with your father, and thank you for sharing that with me, because I think that's such a brutal but really beautiful example of like being fully present with someone. But it's because you felt the real impermanence of those moments with your father.
Mm.
The truth is every moment is just as impermanent, but you really could actually feel the changing nature of those moments with your father. And that's why you were so present, and that's why they were so deep. So instead of just walking around saying, I'm going to be present all day today, why don't you walk around and say, I'm just going to remind myself by watching things and noticing things, how finite everything is.
Yeah.
And the most finite thing that
That's
we have is our
so
breath.
key.
Our breath is
Mm-hmm.
so finite. We inhale and then we exhale. And that's literally impermanence at the nature level. So that's another technique that you can sort of use if being present is a little bit too like wishy-washy. Like, think every moment is so fleeting. We're so
Mm-hmm.
impermanent.
I was listening to a talk on Jay Shetty's podcast. I forgot whose guest was on with him, but there was just a moment where the conversation got very raw and real. And the guest goes, you don't know what's to come next. You don't know what tomorrow holds.
Mm.
Why not take each moment and just fucking make it beautiful? Just make it dope. And I know that's like cliche, but it's also like, whoa, if you actually apply those very simple concepts, it's like really freaking cool. Like whatever moment you're in, just make it dope. Just be there, play, explore, dream, discover,
Wait,
be unattached to the outcome, and just do the thing.
yeah, and those are the people that you really want to be around. And I think we're so attracted to people that are present. I think we are just we intuitively as human beings want to live like that.
Mm-hmm.
But there's something holding us back. I think that's why we love being around animals. Animals are fully present. They're not,
Mm-hmm.
you know, they're not really thinking about much. They're just like with you in that moment. And that's what, and that rubs off on us. Same with like little babies and kids. Like they're so expressive and present that we just love being around them. So I encourage like everyone to just really step into that and realize that every moment is a choice to be happy, to make it dope, however you want to call it. And when you can really own that responsibility, that like no matter what's happening externally, I can choose to be happy in this moment.
Mm-hmm.
You don't even have to use the word happy because that could, be a spectrum of emotions. There's sadness, there's happiness, but you can
Mm-hmm.
just choose to be joyful. There is a superpower in that, and
Mm-hmm.
it really anybody can do it because yoga and meditation. Everyone thinks that like it does bring joyfulness, and it does because it's simply what it does is it shifts your perspective. All yoga asana is a perspective enhancer.
Mm-hmm.
You literally learn how to see the moment from a different angle.
Okay.
Physically, physically is one way. You're like like this, but emotionally and spiritually as well because you're putting yourself through all these different you know different styles of movement, but you're seeing how to see the present moment from a different angle, a different perspective, and from that brings happiness.
Yeah, totally, man.
Um,
I love the word perspective. I actually recently got it tattooed, and every letter in the word that I got tattooed is a slightly different angle. So it forces
ooh,
people to kind of play with it. They're like, "What does that say? What's going on?"
we're in alignment
And
here.
yeah, it's playful, but it's also just like one of the things that I do with my fitness business is I call it perspective architecture.
mm,
And I've kind of hinted at that a little bit, but all that really means is just like we're playing with different lenses. Like so many of us get biased thinking like we got to look this way. It's like, no, look this way, look this way, look this way. But then that's so simple. There's also me watching you, you watching me watching me through your lenses. There's bird's eye view. It's the two of us watching a movie. There's these
mm,
different perspective archetypes that I think
mm,
yoga does for us in a slightly different way because there's an emotional component, there's a presence component, there's holding on, there's letting go, there's curiosity of like, why is that bothering me?
mm,
Why am I comparative to somebody else? And you said it so beautifully on, I think it was the Bearded Man podcast. That was a great episode, by the way. You guys crushed it.
mm,
And it was around this construct I think all of us struggle with in different capacities, which is this unique thought around I need to be this. And I think in yoga it's about the posture ladder. But in life it's about like, oh, I need to make more money, I need to have this house, I need to have this whatever social construct gives us the validation to feel loved, seen, heard, understood.
mhm,
And eventually we can segue that to how that relates to social media.
mhm.
But how have you been able to kind of deconstruct that a little bit now that you've transitioned to this perceived like expert role as a Nike master trainer and all these things where people are like, oh, he's supposed to have it figured out. And you're like, no, I travel nonstop. I'm still a human.
Mm. Yeah. So, is your question like how? Like, what's your question exactly? How do I?
How do you manage the relationship of comparison
Mm,
with the concept of this posture laddering?
hmm. So the posture laddering is just a simple analogy or imagery for you conquer one pose and then you immediately look for the next, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or you make a certain amount of money and then all of a sudden you're looking for the next level, right? So I guess the comparison aspect is like maybe just accepting where you're at. It's like this extreme acceptance. Awareness and acceptance are like two wings of the bird. They need to be of equal strength and size. So,
Mm.
you can't just blindly accept, but having this self-awareness and then realizing like, okay, I fully accept where I am. There's one of my favorite quotes that says, no amount of self-improvement can make up for a lack of self-acceptance. So if you can fully accept yourself, there's actually a beautiful thing that happens. It's not like a weak place to be. The improvement actually happens effortlessly once you fully accept yourself. It's not the other way around. So people think, oh, if I fully accept myself, there's no growth. Like that's actually not true. I think there's even more growth after you fully accept yourself. Otherwise, you're going to get into this really difficult pattern. That's why they call it a ladder, because it never ends and you'll never be fulfilled. It's like pouring water into a bucket with, no bottom. So that's one way to answer the question. And then I guess on my own personal journey, I think, of course, I get stuck in that mode of comparison all the time still. And I think it's just coming back to these practices and coming back to these awarenesses of saying like, why am I comparing? Like, get to the root cause. Why am I trying to compete? And I think once you can really sit with that, and conceptualize that, you'll start to realize the roots, and that will eventually reveal itself to you through stillness, through silence. But it's just an awareness practice. You're never going to be completely free of these things, and if someone tells you they are, most likely they're not.
For sure.
Of course, there's.
This brings me to a quote that I've heard you talk about before, which is, the pose begins when you want to leave it.
Mm,
And I know you've done some of these silent Vipassana retreats. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly.
yeah.
And I feel like in the midst of that, there's moments where you're just like, you have this intrinsic level of escapism. You're like, give me the fuck out of here.
Mm-hmm.
And that probably relates for most people in something like a pigeon pose, or, something that releases emotion that you're like, man, this is incredibly uncomfortable. I want out. Or like the last few moments within a sauna or a cold plunge. What are your thoughts on that construct of just like the pose begins when you want to leave it?
The reason we say that is because the beginning, the beginning of what? I think that's what you have to ask yourself. The pose begins, but what's really beginning? And what's beginning is this transformation. And the transformation only begins when you want to come out of it, because when you want to come out of it is direct feedback that you are at your edge, that you are at that place that you haven't really been before. And you're extending beyond your old limits. So there's so many ways to find your edge. There's different like biomarkers, you could call them, or energy markers. You could find your edge physically. You could find your edge emotionally. What is emotional resiliency? Like, how do you find your edge in all these different aspects of your life? And then instead of running away from that place or backing off, how do you actually sit in it and marinate in it and grow from it? And that's why we don't really often have an opportunity to do that in our lives. We're pretty, as human beings in the 21st century, we're pretty cozy. We're pretty, everything's very convenient. So a yoga practice is just one modality. I mean, that's why cold plunges, I think personally, have taken off the way they have, is because people are confronted with being uncomfortable. And that's the pose beginning. For some people, it's dipping their toe in and that's their edge. Others, they have to sit in there 5 minutes. They're still getting the same benefit because they both found their edge.
No, it's well said.
And, Huberman talks about it too. I'm really on this. I think that the worlds of yoga and, ancient Eastern wisdom and science are sort of colliding. But they're talking about how, when you do things that you don't want to do, you're strengthening this part of your brain called the anterior mid-cingulate cortex, which is in charge for a lot of different things in your body, especially like longevity. But really, I don't like the word like doing things you don't want to do, because it has this like, it doesn't have to suck. Like that, like yogis talk about it all the time. They've put themselves through suffering, but it doesn't have to be suffering. It could just be something at your edge, and you can actually learn to love and enjoy that place. And the more you can be comfortable in that place, I think the more growth you'll have in your life.
Man, that's so cool the way you said that, Jonah. I want to like sit in that for a second, because something I've thought about as you were describing that is I'm going to deconstruct my own language here. And that is, oftentimes I say seek edges or take the leap, right? Like those are things that, you know, seemingly are personal stories that I've played with and explored. But what about just playing in edges, playing in that messy middle between seeking and taking the leap? And I think maybe the cold plunge is a great analogy for that. But I think the way you talked about it is very special, in the sense of like, it doesn't have to be embracing the suck and like these big Goggins quotes. It can be exploring the unknown, playing in a space that maybe you haven't tasted the flavor before. And it's just something new. It doesn't have to be labeled as like rah, positive or negative. It can just be. And I think reconstructing or deconstructing that narrative allows us to be like, hey, why do I want out of pigeon pose sooner rather than later? I got into it. I was a little fidgety in the beginning. I didn't really find my breath. Maybe I needed a block underneath my hip. Maybe I needed to regress the structure a little bit. But rather than like running away from the edge, what if I can just like tinker and be curious here and play? And then, you know, from there, maybe I am thinking about tissue transformation. Maybe I am thinking about something emotional that I need to let go of. Maybe I am thinking about wanting to run away, but realizing that right now I have the courage not to. Maybe I'm just breathing. And these are all thought patterns that, you know, are wavelengths of the peaks and valleys of that moment that I personally experienced. I'm sure other people have different experiences.
Yeah.
But I really like that you didn't label it as like hot or cold, good or bad, black or white. It was just be there.
Yeah, just be there. It's so simple. And gosh, what was I going to say here? Yeah, keep going, because you had my train of thought going to some. Oh, yeah, like that place, that edge. It's such an important topic and a place to be. The best way I like to describe it is like getting close to a fire. You don't want to get too close where you get burned, but you don't want to be too far back where you miss that warmth and that heat, that transformation. So it is that dance of like stepping into it and coming out of it, in everything that you do. You know, sometimes for a lot of people, they could run ultra marathons, but never truly find their edge. Maybe their edge is having a difficult, vulnerable conversation with a friend, you know? So thinking of it in that sense, and then also just making sure the yogis talked about expansion. And I think that's our biggest danger as human beings, is to shrink, and not in the way that you might think. I think the biggest danger that we have in society and as humans is to shrink. So I think we need certain things in our life, and you can call these like rituals, or you can call these practices, that expand us, right? That get us outside of our box of comfort, and that really help us grow, because we are, as the years go, we shrink physically, we shrink in awareness, we get smaller. Gravity literally compresses us. So we need things that actually open us, lengthen us, extend us, you know, elongate us mentally, physically, emotionally, so we don't get stuck in that paralysis, and that we're constantly seeking new heights, and not to get any particular place, but to be our full potential, which is,
I like that,
actually enlightenment in simpler
I like
words.
that. A close personal friend of mine loves to say, don't play small, and like spread your wings, let your light shine, for lack of a better term. And when you think about like a graveyard, for example, it's the richest place in the world. Songs that were never sang, poetry that was never written, books that were never written, experiences that were never had, love never pursued. And I think something that comes to mind here is, I hope I don't bastardize this, but when I listen to you, I think about, people think with perspective that like yoga transforms the way we see things. But in reality, I think it transforms the person who sees. It like shifts your lenses a little bit.
Hmm.
And I think in doing so, it allows you to do it scared, to just go do the thing, go tinker and play in the messy middle of edge seeking and then playfulness within the realm of the edge,
Hmm.
in order to not just take the leap, but be in that space and wonder.
Hmm.
Because fear, in my opinion, is a mile wide and an inch deep. We create this narrative that it's so hard, and then we take that first step. We think we're going to fall.
Hmm.
But in reality, you're like, whoa, it's only like 6 inches deep. That's not bad. Okay, let me take another step. You
Hmm.
take another step, and all of a sudden momentum gets built. And then from there, it's like, it's transformative. It's beautiful.
Yeah, yeah. I love all these analogies. You know, you're really preparing for me for my next yoga class. So I might have to steal a few of these.
Steal them, man.
But yeah, you know, like you can look at fear as like a roadmap. I love that analogy, you know, because what you're afraid of is something that you truly actually desire and want to bring into your life. There's a reason you're afraid of it, you know. We're afraid to live full out because we wonder what our full selves would actually look like if we did it. So using fear as a roadmap, and I like that 6 inches deep, but also like sometimes we jump over the edge and we think, or we look over the edge and we think it's going to be this massive fall with impact, but really we jump and it's a bed of feathers. I can't remember who said that quote. Maybe you do because you're in this space and you. Some intelligent person had said that, but it's so real because whatever we're looking for is on the other side of fear, and usually when we lean into it, it's just a bed of feathers. It's not as hard of a landing as you thought. um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think just to kind of like wrap this thing up, you know, people on their last moments, I think, you know, they do wish they would have expressed themselves more. They do wish that they would have, you know, worked less and just enjoyed life a little bit more. And coming this is coming actually from a hospice nurse, a book that she had read by interviewing her patients. And the last one that really rings true to me is just this self-expression. We just don't do it enough. And so find more things that you can do where you just feel like you're expressing yourself. For me, I think yoga, like I'm breathing and moving, I'm flowing to music. When else would I be able to like express myself in that capacity, in that range, where I
Mm-hmm.
could laugh and cry in the same class without looking like a crazy person if I were to just do that in the street? We just don't
Mm-hmm.
have these spaces to express ourselves. And that's half the battle. It's building
Totally.
and curating these environments where you can literally feel your full spectrum of what it means to be a human being.
Totally. I want to summarize that based on one of your most recent posts. Well, not most recent, but the top one that you have pinned on your page for people to gain a little bit of context. I'm a big fan of art, as are you. I hear the hints of music and dance and play, and it's Rick Rubin, man. The dude is a genius. He's one of my favorites. And what I think about often in relation to him is you can't create art with the consumer in mind because it's fleeting. You're trying to satisfy external expectations. You got to create it for you. And your quote here is, "We're all translators for messages the universe is broadcasting. The best artists tend to be the ones with the most sensitive antenna to draw in the energy resonating at that particular moment.
Mm,
They feel everything more deeply."
mm, what a
And
quote.
then you kind of gave your piece on it, which is, "I feel a constant yoga and meditation practice strengthens that antenna to unlock your true creative potential." When I read that, man, I got like the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I was like,
Mm.
okay, this is dope.
Well said. Well, thank you for seeing me and as I am and really just creating this space. And I can tell you put a lot of intention and preparation into your work, which is, you know, just makes it really wonderful for the guest to feel seen and understood like that. So much appreciated on that front. Preparation meets great opportunity.
Totally, man. As we wrap things up, as you look into the future, what's most exciting you about where you are in the world of yoga, wellness, and the world as you travel and you're kind of embarking on a lot of these different Nike adventures and different retreats that you're exploring throughout the world?
Yeah, I'm excited to just continue being a student. You know, it's I love this. I love this practice. I love how there's no end to it. And I'm just excited to continue to travel and learn and connect with different groups and different people. And, there's this optimism that I have with where we're going as a global conscious tribe. And I feel like we're all elevating each other. And when one person sort of takes that leap or steps into it, everybody else feels that shift. And especially if they're in your circle, so I'm on a more abstract note. I think I'm just really excited, and I have a genuine optimism. But from a specific standpoint, I think I'm really excited to continue to refine certain genres of work that I'm exploring, including music. It's something that I feel really scared in and vulnerable in, because it's not something that I grew up with, like yoga. I'm comfortable with. I'm really looking forward to the teacher trainings, just these collaborations that keep coming together, because for me, it's the most fruitful work that I do, because you're
Mm-hmm.
planting these seeds that, continue to plant more seeds. And it's this extension, and it feels very rewarding to be able to pass on these techniques and these skills and these gifts, but also learn from my students. So teacher trainings for me to cultivate that and continue to refine that program is exciting. We do them all over the world. We have our next one in Thailand. So um, it's cool, because that concept of misogi. You do one thing
Yeah.
every year that really freaking stretches you. For me,
Mm-hmm.
it's the teacher trainings, because we meet in Thailand for 24 nights, and they're 12-hour days. And
Wow.
basically the whole year, my mind is sort of like, with being mindful and being present. There's always a piece of me that's like, how am I preparing for this, or what am I doing that's going to strengthen myself for this moment? Because that's the
Mm-hmm.
peak. It's the hardest I work all year, I like to joke around and say, but it's the highest that I have to be, and everything else supports that, and then that supports everything else. So you live a certain way for 24 nights underneath the magnifying glass, and then the rest of your year a little bit rubs off, and then you keep coming back to that thing, and that's how transformation happens.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess if that makes any
That's awesome.
sense.
It's really cool to hear that you stay ready, so you don't have to get ready specifically for that singular moment of time that's underneath the
Stay ready.
magnifying glass, like you said.
Yeah.
But also just you've talked a few times around the concept of planting seeds, and I think you're an artist when it comes to this delayed gratification, which is very hard for this younger population that gets immediate gratification from this social media structure. And I just want to share with people briefly, you've talked a lot about the bamboo analogy.
Mm.
And that is for 5 years, you plant that seed originally, and you're tenderizing the soil, you're giving it sunlight, you're giving it water, you're giving it love, and nothing seems to be sprouting.
Mm-mm.
And then all of a sudden in that 5th year, man, 8 to 9 feet, that bamboo plant like sprouts. And
Mm.
so for people listening, stick with it. Keep enrolling yourself into the human experience of practice and
Mm.
playfulness, connection and collaboration.
Mm.
And my last question for you, Jonah, if you could have a billboard that had some sort of statement or saying or word, what would you like to share with people?
Oof. Great. Wow, that's a good one. I don't think anyone's ever asked me that. And I like how you make it so visual too. Like, if you could have one billboard, what would it say?
Hmm.
Um, I'm kind of like battling between two, but I'm trying to think what would be more important.
Give them both. Give them both. You get 2 billboards for today.
Okay, the first billboard would be, "You're exactly where you're supposed to be,"
Ba-dum-bum.
and the second billboard would be, I can't say "Just do it." Nike already took that. Just be.
There you go.
Just be,
There you
or
go.
wait, one more. Maybe the path is the practice.
Ooh, that might be the title of the episode, brother.
The path is the practice. And just to give a
That's
little
cool.
context, because again, we can get kind of stuck in the words. It's everything that we talked about. Everything that we're doing our entire lives is the practice. So don't underestimate those mundane things that happen in life. It's all leading to something. we're sitting in this position right now because everything that we've done has led us to this moment. So continue to live with awareness and mindfulness and realize that everything is the path. And it's
That's cool. I dig it, man. It reminds me of a famous Emerson quote, and I'll leave people and you with this. Do not go where the path may lead. Go instead where there is no path and leave a trail. Innovation at its finest.
I love that, brother. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Jonah Kest. Jonah, where can people find you?
They can find me on Instagram, Kest Yoga, Kest Yoga, and Spotify, Jonah Kest, and yeah, that's and wherever you put this podcast. I can't wait to see it come out, and I also look forward to getting in a yoga flow with you, and maybe even a hoop session.
I'd love that, man. Yeah, you can check us out. We're on Spotify, Apple, YouTube. Just type in ALLSMITH, all caps.
Ooh, I'm gonna
And
be an
we can
ALLSMITH
share
the
this
rest of my
very.
day.
Let's do it, man. I look forward to sharing that space with you. And thank you so much for your time and your special energy today, man.
Thank you, brother. Blessings.
Guys, for those of you watching, if you enjoyed my conversation with Jonah Kest today, please rate, review, subscribe, and share with your friends. And as always, stay on the hunt for who you've not yet become. Until next time, take care.